Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, cuts to charter schools were among the programs that were hit by Governor Whitmer's line item veto slicing plan. And the kids that need those schools the most will be the most affected. Ben DeGrow from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy is with us tonight to break it all down. Plus, what's the latest on road funding? The governor ran on a promise to fix them. Nearly a year into her first term, there is no plan in sight. Two people who work in the front lines of fixing our roads are also with us tonight. And we have strong viewer reaction from last week's show here on the follow-up when we focused on opioids and what's being done locally to combat the problem.
Hi, Mr. Redford. I want to make a comment about the opioid conversation you had, because I myself am a senior citizen. Much is being overlooked about seniors who primarily are prescribed these drugs by physicians because of medical illness, often pain, and when overdoses or related illnesses because of reactions to opioids long-term or taking them daily, they can really make you sick. I have been undergoing treatment for 2 years. I'm just a regular working class person who retired. This is a tremendous area that is overlooked. Seniors do have addictions, but a lot of seniors will prescribe the medications. The pharmaceutical companies are involved with the distribution of these drugs that can really destroy a senior's life. Thank you so much.
Hi, Mr. Redford. Thanks for taking my call. I try to watch you every week on follow-up. And one of the things I think that need to be brought out is the fact you talk about the amount of losses that we have with the individuals that we're losing to the narcotic issue through death. One of the things that should mean something is the victims of those deaths. It's what is left when they are overdosed or whatever, is those will be people that will not have children. Those are people that will not have grandchildren. We will lose a whole host of generations by their loss. I wish that would be brought up. I do have family members that have had that, and we have lost, and we miss them terribly.
Well, we appreciate those calls, that's for sure. We also have updates on two other issues we took on during the follow-up in recent weeks on vaping and mental illness. A Michigan judge overturned Governor Whitmer's emergency ruling to ban flavored vaping products. Of course, the governor is fighting back, trying to get that ban reinstated. And Michigan mental health counselors can continue to diagnose and treat patients in a clinical setting. That's the result of a new bill that passed in the legislature this week. Recent rule changes by the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs threaten their livelihood and the mental health of their clients. And that's not all. While President Trump is the focus of an impeachment investigation, which we have analyzed here in the follow-up, we'd like your reaction to this video by a Republican watchdog group.
When Donald Trump ran for president, he criticized Hillary Clinton for
Hillary Clinton used the State Department to enrich their family at America's expense. She gets rich, making you poor. I'm running for president to put you, the American worker, first.
Well, since Trump has been president, the only thing he's put first is his own interests.
Taxpayer money.
Taxpayer money.
Your tax money was spent at Trump properties.
At Trump properties.
President Trump saying the 2020 G7 will be at the Trump National Doral, a property he owns.
Vice President Mike Pence spent 2 nights at one of President Donald Trump's golf resorts.
Pence's decision to stay there cost taxpayers $600,000.
The U.S. military spent $200,000 in taxpayer funds at President Trump's resort.
After the election, Mar-a-Lago doubled its initiation fee.
4 members of Mar-a-Lago have been tapped for diplomatic positions.
You're having the President of the United States taking money from the American people and putting it in his own pocket.
So what do you think of that? Does it begin to show that President Trump's lock on Republican support might just be waning a bit. We'd like to hear from you and share your reactions on next week's show. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can also dial into our follow-up hotline. And we'd like to see, if you'd like to see any of our previous shows, just log on to deltabroadcasting.org. Up first, Ben DeGrow, the Director of Education Policy of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. Thanks for coming in. Before we dive deep into this education policy in the state, what do you make of Governor Whitmer's sort of using the line item veto a record 147 times to try to come up with a state budget?
Yeah, she's playing a real hardball game with the budget, and her end game apparently is to get this gas tax raised, and things like education funding and charter schools and other issues are getting caught in the crossfire. And frankly, some of these charter students are basically ending up as political pawns in the process, and that's where the whole thing goes awry.
Well, tell me about that. How do you see them sort of political pawns in the process based on what she did with the line item vetoes?
So Governor Whitmer very creatively used her line item veto pen to go after one section in the budget. And I'd almost have to show you a picture of how she kind of crossed up and left just a few words left in there. Basically, all it adds up to was the funding increase that other public schools get. And people need to remember, charter schools are public schools, just a different kind. So all the extra, the funding increase that other public schools got, charter schools were left with no funding increase at all.
And when you think about a lot of the students that choose charter schools, or at least parents are choosing that for their kids, many of these kids are sort of disadvantaged, right, underprivileged, and so in some ways you're hurting kids that probably need that sort of education the most, right?
Right, and disproportionately. So, charter schools, three out of every 4 kids who attends a charter school in Michigan are considered low income by the way the government measures that. That's a lot higher rate than the kids who are going to traditional district schools, and that's because the parents who see the need for these schools are coming out of particularly urban, mostly school systems, where the education system has really let their kids down and they're not getting what they need. So despite all up front, this whole long budget battle, Governor Whitmer was really making an emphasis that we need to dedicate more school aid resources to help these at-risk, low-income kids. In the end, her line item veto disproportionately hurts some of these children who are more at risk.
And again, as far as charter schools are concerned, there seems to be a myth out there that they're just sort of another layer of private schools, but they're not. They do get public funding, right?
Right, and that's always good to clear up. Charter schools are public schools. They're not tuition-based. They can't teach religion. They have to take the state tests. They're accountable to the laws of the state. Their teachers have to be certified. In a lot of ways, they're similar to public schools. They're just different in a few ways and have a little more flexibility with their labor contracts and are governed by independent boards rather than elected boards. But for most purposes, they're public schools.
And as far as those cuts to the charter schools are concerned, the impact really took effect yesterday. How so?
Yeah, this very week. So the state of Michigan, 11 times a year, will send out a monthly payment to schools to fill out the school funding formula to make sure they're getting the amount of money they're supposed to get under the law. And the first one of those school aid payments reached school districts and charter schools on October 21st, yesterday. And so that means this all became real all of a sudden. These charter schools that were expecting the same funding increase that all the other public schools are getting, they didn't get it. And so the fact that the governor's decided to treat charter students differently than district students just became real this week.
And we'll probably see and hear about the fallout to that in the coming weeks based on those lack of dollars, whether that's staffing, school supplies, you name it. There were some other cuts in education I think are important that maybe some of us missed. One had to do with sort of cuts to remote districts in the state. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So in the state school aid budget, every district and charter school gets what's called the foundation allowance, which is like your basic formula funding. There's also lots of other little line items in the budget where the things, a lot of them that the governor vetoed. And one of those line items is extra funding for what they call isolated or remote districts. And by crossing out the funding for this section, basically what the governor did was some of the really tiny districts in the Upper Peninsula are taking like 15 to 20% of their entire budget, just got hit and became a victim of this. So these little tiny school districts as a proportion of their own budgets, got even a bigger hit than the charter schools did.
Oh my gosh. And the other thing that we wanted to talk about, cuts to the strict discipline academies. Talk to me about that and how that's being impacted.
Yeah, the strict discipline academies is another one of those line items, and it's basically a term in law for a certain kind of charter school that caters to serving second chance students, kids who've been in trouble with the law or been recommended by the judicial system. And so these are schools specially designed to help turn things around for these kids, alternative programs. And by striking out these line items, some of these strict discipline academies have also taken similarly large hits.
So this is interesting because it sort of goes beyond the headlines. We kind of get that big headline about education cuts, but we're getting into the real middle of this stuff. It's kind of a shell game, and I'm not sure to just sort of blame the governor itself, because she is paired up against a GOP-controlled legislature. So they've got this yin and yang going on, right? And so the legislature proposed a spending increase of something like $120 to $240 per student in the school aid budget. That's almost a 3% increase overall. The governor didn't like that, so that didn't fly. I think she proposed 4%. And with the cuts, it kind of gets in the middle, didn't it, sort of? I mean.
Right, so yeah, you hit the numbers pretty good. There's the governor's increase. She had a little bit different priorities in the school aid budget, but overall, she was proposing a 4% increase. Interestingly, certain of her political allies were touting this 4% increase as historic and game-changing and it's a dramatic increase. And then when the legislature came out with its budget, which was a 3% increase, not as big as a 4% increase, but we're talking differences at the margins, the reaction was, this is horrible, this is atrocious, you're not helping schools at all. Interestingly, though, the net effect of the governor's line item veto is we still have an increase to the school aid budget from last year, but it's only 2% instead of the 3% the legislature wanted and the 4% she originally proposed.
The other issue that came out of this in terms of a shell game, I think the GOP-controlled legislature wanted to take some teacher pension funds, kind of a one-time deal to help a long-term road funding plan. That didn't fly, but what do you make of that, how they're trying to do that?
Yeah, that's a challenge, and trying to solve the problem with the roads issue has created some more challenges as far as how do you fund this over the long term. Ultimately, I think that it's probably wise that that particular idea didn't surface, but it's kind of ironic that while the governor's trying to make the roads the front line of her agenda, that she cut almost $400 million from what the Republicans proposed because she said it wasn't enough or wasn't spent in the right way. So it's a lot of political hardball going on over a couple of the biggest issues that matter to people a lot.
Right. I'll just ask you one other question in terms of how does Michigan sort of education, funding for public education, stack up to maybe not the rest of the country, but those that are sort of within the Midwest? Are we funding enough? Are we not funding enough in general, would you say?
Michigan sits right about the middle nationally, right about the middle regionally. So if you add in all the revenues on a per student basis, it's about $13,000 per student that Michigan takes in. So Michigan was hit pretty hard by the recession last decade. Our funding has not grown at the same rate as some other states, but still when it all settles out, we're still right in the middle among the states.
Okay, we're going to see how this plays out in the next couple of weeks. This whole state budget is still sort of in flux, and it seems like both sides, the governor and the GOP-controlled legislature, the leaders there are still kind of getting behind closed doors trying to figure this out, and maybe some of the things we talked about in terms of cuts will be reinstated. So we'll see how it goes. Hey, thanks for coming in tonight. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Well, up next, what's happening with road funding, and if you have concerns about a road or bridge in your town, where do you turn? We have some answers straight ahead. But first, we'd like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here in the follow-up. Join our conversation by visiting our website at deltabroadcasting.org/thefollowup, or hit me up on social media via Facebook and Twitter. Go to facebook.com/QTVFollowup and on Twitter at QTVFollowup. And that's not all. Drop us an email at thefollowup@delta.edu, or you can record a comment or question on our follow-up hotline for next week's show. That's 1-877-430-8989. So join the conversation at The Follow-Up. We really want to hear from you. Welcome back to the follow-up. About this time last year, you might recall, Gretchen Whitmer was campaigning for governor on a platform to fix the damn roads. It got her elected, but now almost a year into her first term, we still don't have a road funding plan. So what's happening with road funding, and what did we get done on the roads in the past year? Dennis Borchard is the managing director of the Saginaw County Road Commission, and his right-hand man, Rob Hudek, is the maintenance supervisor. Good to have you guys in.
Thank you.
So let's start with the stalemate in Lansing. Ben touched on it a little bit when the state budget was talked about over road funding. So the governor proposed a 45-cent hike in the gas tax. We've all heard about that. That was sort of almost laughable, no disrespect. But the GOP on the other side, their controlled legislator, wanted to put $400 million additionally into the budget to fix roads, which the governor vetoed. So somewhere along the line, we've got to get to the middle. So where are you on this? Are they going to get there, and what is it going to take to get there?
You know, the last time I was here, I made that statement. It was bold of the governor to put a 45-cent tax hike out there. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but I really think she maybe got everyone thinking about how bad these roads really are. So. But when you look at road funding, and when this package was passed in, 15, it was a 1.2 billion, and we actually, the Road Commission, Saginaw County, really didn't start seeing the funds coming into 17, 18. But right now, we haven't missed a beat yet. The funds are still coming in. We're probably 3/4 of the way. But we got another 300-some million that we'll see how maybe long-term revenue funding will turn out. But I'm confident that we'll at least get what we had in 15. A lot of discussion on both sides, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, efficiency bills coming in. They're trying to maybe separate so more funding can actually go to the roads and maybe separate education from the package altogether. But I'm leaving that up to them, but I'm confident from talking to both sides that they're going to get a great plan together.
I think you're right, because there is pressure on both sides, because I think she gets unfair blame for some of this, and the GOP-controlled legislature, they're the other side, and they have to come together. There's pressure on both sides. You mentioned that 2015 road funding plan. That was back with Governor Snyder, right? And we get those questions a lot from viewers and others. So what happened to that money? You've sort of touched on that, right?
Yeah, when you look at, and this is statewide, you look at, we hadn't had an increase in funds since 1997. So when you look at how we've been able to function, whether it's even doing road projects, maintenance items, to get any type of funding across the state, it was a relief. At least we're able to now start doing some projects and actually putting down some asphalt on our roads, which we hadn't been able to do. And some of the counties haven't even been able to have money to match their federal projects to even get a federal project done. So,
Rob, you can weigh in on this too, because we talked about this beforehand, that it's not all on the Michigan taxpayers here, right? This is a partnership between state, local, the federal government. There's been a decrease in road funding by $250 million in our state by the feds each of the last 8 years. And the federal gas tax hasn't increased since 1993. So I don't know if you guys can talk about, it's not all on us, the feds have to kind of help her too, right?
They really do. I tell you, from a maintenance standpoint, really just feel like we're falling behind. When you talk about pricing, for example, salt this year, $73 a ton, as opposed to 2003 when it was $23 a ton. Prices keep going up, but the funding is not catching up with it. And from a maintenance standpoint, it's just so frustrating not to be able to keep up or go further with what we're doing. Under our director, Dan Medina, we were able to do 175 miles of chip seal road this year. We're trying to hold things together, but we need to move forward.
Right. Well, let's talk about the last year. I'm going to talk about the salt and how you're preparing for the winter in a moment. But Dennis, let's talk about this last year. In the midst of this road funding sort of chaos, right? You're still getting the job done. So talk about some of the bigger projects that you got done in the last year.
And I always try to look. I try to be optimistic, and we have been able to do some projects that definitely warranted, resurfacing. One of them was our Dixie Highway. I talked about it last time. It was going to be in 2 phases. The first phase has been completed. That's from the overpass to airport. And that is a road that is traveled by everyone on the weekend. If they're going to Frankenmuth, coming back, phase 2 now will be put into construction here from airport to junction. But as anything, I look at how you do things, how you actually put a road down, and you have to remember that just a typical crush and shape is relatively inexpensive, but it's costly. But when you have to go in and replace box culverts and relocate water mains, it gets costly. And so those are the frustrations that you deal with. But as I always said, if you're going to do it right. So that was a positive. And if you travel that road, you know what it's like. It's at times where you really have to concentrate on how we've done. And just maintaining that road, the cost of patching every year to go out there, because roads do break up in the spring, but that's been a positive one. I had mentioned to you that Saginaw County will have its first roundabout, and I'm excited about that, and that's going to happen at River.
Freeland.
Yeah,
right?
Freeland, River and Tibbetawasi. No, River and Freeland. And that one there is, if you get out there at 5 o'clock in the evening, it's congested, you're backed up. So a lot of people are concerned how these roundabouts are coming up all over the state. But we're all about educating our residents, and all that stuff will happen, but you're going to see a huge improvement in traffic flow out there.
Tell me about how you guys go about prioritizing what needs to get done, whether it's a road or bridges. How do you assign your guys where to go first? How does that happen?
Well, Saginaw County is made up, we take care of 1,900 miles of roadway in Saginaw County, and we do that with 45 laborers. In Saginaw County, to manage it better, we divvy it up into 4 sections. We have 4 foremen, and we just try to localize and manage that way.
Right. Looking ahead to winter, I got to get into that, because any day now we could hear that first taste of snow.
That's right.
What kind of preparations do you do? Salt, maintaining trucks, kind of run us through the process there.
Yeah, currently all our salt barns are full. We have 3 barns, one in Saginaw on Sheridan Avenue. We have 8,000 tons of salt in there. In Chesaning, we have 1,200 tons, that's full. And Hemlock, also 1,200 tons. Also, each location has its brine also. We're going to be in the process of what we call a pumpkin parade, which is a truck inspection. So our mechanics and our drivers get together. Actually, it'll be on Halloween, October 31st, at our Saginaw barn to inspect each and every truck to make sure that those trucks are ready. Another issue would be having the proper inventory, whether it's 2&S sand, blades for the trucks, things of those nature. But we're ready to go.
Right.
Just after, we need to know exactly where we're at after the inspection.
And you have different kind of trucks now, or more efficient trucks, and maybe less staffing? Is that how that works?
Yeah. It's definitely less staffing.
Yeah.
But how we're making up with the less staffing would be, for example, you might see a wing on a truck, so that they're actually doing 2 lanes instead of 1 lane. So that's something somewhat new. You see that more maybe with the MDOT highways, but we're actually going into that program too. And it's something the drivers really need to, kind of keep their eyes open for.
It's been so effective in our rural areas where you get that blowing snow and have that extra wing out there to push that snow, because you might not get back there for a while. So, in conditions where you have that, Frankenmuth is one of the areas, but anywhere you're susceptible to the blowing snow, huge impact. So many more efficiencies that we do. Dan and Rob, how we attack a storm is different. Every storm is different. We might get out earlier and get that salt down, so we're able to work it and be able to get that ice pack off quicker. Anything that we've done is efficient, so we're not wasting time and actually getting condition safe for our school buses and traffic when they hit it in the morning. So.
And the mixture of salt, it's not just salt, there's something else in there too, right?
Well, we have a mixture of salt, mineral well brine water, and also in our rural areas we'll use 2NS sand on your intersections on the locals. And the way we prioritize winter routes, so the public knows, is that a winter route for us would be the emergency routes that are set up by the Emergency Operations Center at the courthouse and us. Then it would be primary roads, high volume locals, and then we get to our subdivisions. So that's how we are prioritizing our winter snow routes.
Dennis, I know you're pretty responsive to the constituents out there, and if there's a viewer out there tonight going, do I have a say in this? If I see a road or a bridge that's I think needs to have some concern here and be dealt with, how do they go about doing
You
that?
know, and it's technology. Since I've started 7 years ago as the managing director, our website, the site that they can call in and let us know the conditions out there. We have an AVL system now where people actually can track our vehicles and see where we've been in an event. 911 partnership with them, Randy Fowle, the director. You know, it's just amazing all the connections that you have. Our townships, fire and chief, you know, they're especially we have a wind event and we're still trying to, you know, help them get salt down on a situation where they need it. It's the type of relationship and partnership we have across Saginaw County is one of a kind.
It really is. That's very true.
Yeah. And so if there's a road and bridges in Frankenmuth, for instance, or out in wherever else, they could call and say, I think this road needs to be taken care of here.
Oh, we'll hear it.
Yeah.
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 And sometimes, you know, people think that, hey, put salt down, put salt down. We'll do it at intersections, but if you got blowing snow and everything and you're putting salt down, trust me, you're going to have a big, you know, pile of snow sitting there. But conditions, our drivers, we're fortunate. We got outstanding workers. They do their job every day they go out.
We really do. Very dedicated.
And speaking of that, any advice to drivers when you're around road construction, doing salt? I mean,
you know, it's nothing's changed. It's don't crowd the plow. Know that these people are out there assisting you, helping you get to work, helping the buses get their kids safe. We're really there for you, and we're doing the best we can. I can promise you that.
Well, you guys make a good team. Thanks for coming in. We're going to have you on again, and I hope the state gets that figured out and gets some more dollars. Have a good